La Webtv du Africa CEO Forum se reconnecte à nouveau avec vous, justement avec un temps qu'on va avoir, avec un invité qui a eu vraiment l'amabilité de nous offrir ces quelques minutes avec son agenda chargé, puisque il a des rencontres à établir. Nous sommes avec le président de la CGECI, très heureux, la Confédération Générale donc, des entreprises de Côte d'Ivoire, le patronat ivoirien avec M. Jean-Marie Aka. Bonjour, comment allez-vous?
Bonjour Eric.
Merci d'être là. Ma première question, c'est est-ce que vous courez après les sollicitations ou bien tout le monde court vers vous pour vous avoir parce que vous êtes le grand responsable? Comment se passent ces échanges dans le cadre de cette édition du Africa CEO Forum?
Non, je dirais que c'est dans les deux sens. C'est dans les deux sens et nous nous en réjouissons. Nous nous en réjouissons d'avoir cette grande occasion de rencontre, de contact direct. Et donc, après 2 années d'absence du CIO Forum, nous nous réjouissons que cette reprise se tienne à Abidjan, parce que nous pensons que déjà, d'une manière générale, la place de l'Africa CEO Forum, c'est d'abord en Afrique.
Oui.
Et puis évidemment, je dirais en Afrique, et puis pour nous, Ivoiriens, très heureux que ce soit à Abidjan.
À nouveau, ouais. Effectivement, Abidjan devient le centre de gravité du monde des affaires et du secteur public. 2 années d'absence, vous l'avez dit, une édition de tous les records d'ailleurs, beaucoup de présence ici, de pays représentés, plus de 70 pays présents sur cette édition. Une année aussi de défis, puisque la conjoncture, on la sait très bousculée, les turbulences. Nous avons cette thématique qu'on a plantée au niveau des échanges, la souveraineté, la croissance verte et la transformation digitale. Alors le patronat ivoirien, lui aussi, fait face dans ce contexte-là à apporter des réponses pour s'ajuster avec les différents objectifs des entreprises. Comment vous abordez justement ces turbulences au niveau de vos feuilles de route personnelles sur la croissance africaine et la prospérité du continent?
Nous nous réjouissons d'abord du thème choisi par l'Africa CEO Forum pour cette année. Et ce thème, selon nous, vient en parfaite résonance du thème de la dernière édition de la CGECI Academy, qui est donc la rencontre du patronat ivoirien, qui a eu lieu en 2021, l'année dernière, et sur le thème crise et résilience des entreprises en Afrique. Nous nous réjouissons donc du thème de cette année et de l'engouement que ce thème a suscité à travers donc le record de participation que vous indiquez. Et nous en tirons la conclusion que les chefs d'entreprise ivoiriens, les chefs d'entreprise africains et au-delà, les chefs de la communauté d'affaires mondiale, peut-être à la même lecture que nous, de penser que au sortir de toutes ces crises majeures que nous venons de traverser et qui ne sont peut-être pas terminées, puisque justement notre édition de la CGECI Academy de l'année dernière tendait à dire que nous serons de plus en plus dans un monde de crise. Et donc, cette affluence-là nous comporte peut-être dans notre lecture de penser que l'Afrique, au sortir de ces crises-là, apparaît plus comme une terre d'opportunités. La Côte d'Ivoire, en particulier notre pays, apparaît plus comme une terre d'opportunités parce qu'aujourd'hui, oui, cette crise-là amène à revoir notre paradigme et à repenser le rôle économique, la place économique que l'Afrique doit occuper à travers ses entreprises.
Alors ce qui est intéressant, vous avez mentionné justement le grand rendez-vous de la CGECI Academy qui est annoncé avec les présences notamment de personnalités. C'est une complémentarité lorsque vous voyez justement l'engouement que vous avez indiqué de l'Africa CEO Forum et le rendez-vous que vous allez annoncer aussi dans quelques mois sur Abidjan. Il y a des éléments connexes, vous l'avez dit, au niveau des thématiques, au niveau des discussions. Dans quelle mesure ça contribue à justement faire accélérer les dossiers à travers ces rencontres que vous établissez avec les partenaires que vous rencontrez?
Alors oui, je pense qu'il y a une complémentarité, une cohérence dans les échanges qui ont lieu aussi bien au niveau du CEO Forum, donc, qui est un cadre peut-être un peu plus large qu'au niveau de notre rencontre annuelle de la CGECI. Il y a une cohérence parce qu'aujourd'hui, effectivement, comme j'indiquais tout à l'heure, au sortir de ces différentes crises-là, il apparaît clairement pour toutes les parties que l'Afrique la Côte d'Ivoire, l'Afrique sont des terres d'opportunités. Nous devons produire davantage dans nos pays. Nous devons produire davantage dans notre continent. Cette crise nous amène à poser la problématique de notre souveraineté, de notre souveraineté et de la souveraineté donc de la couverture de nos besoins. Et elle est apparue de manière très criarde dans le cadre de la Covid-19, où nous nous sommes rendus compte que ce soit au niveau pharmaceutique, au niveau des produits sanitaires et d'autres produits, je dirais, courants.
La disponibilité des vaccins.
La disponibilité des vaccins, nous nous sommes rendus compte que oui, l'Afrique ne devait pas être totalement dépendante de l'extérieur pour la couverture de ses besoins. Nous nous sommes rendus compte également que l'Afrique et les entreprises africaines avaient une capacité d'adaptation qui leur permettait de pouvoir contribuer à la production de ces biens stratégiques. La dernière crise que nous vivons, la crise de la guerre en Ukraine, a, remis sur la table cette problématique-là, vue sous l'angle principalement de la couverture des besoins alimentaires. Et je pense qu'aujourd'hui, tout le monde a parfaitement conscience que l'Afrique ne doit plus être seulement une terre de consommation qui consomme, qui importe des produits manufacturés venant d'ailleurs. Nous devons être une terre de production.
Et de transformation.
En avons absolument les capacités. Nous en avons les capacités naturelles. Nous avons des ressources naturelles, nous avons une agriculture, nous avons les capacités humaines, nous avons une jeunesse à mettre au travail. Donc nous devons être une terre de production et nous devons être une terre de création de valeur. Dans la production, nous ne devons pas nous contenter d'être au stade de production primaire. Nous devons transformer ces besoins primaires, transformer donc nos produits agricoles pour mettre sur les marchés, pour mettre sur nos marchés et les marchés extérieurs des biens finaux destinés à la consommation de la population mondiale. Je pense que c'est le grand enseignement que ces crises nous enseignent et qui sont bien relevées par ces première grande rencontre d'affaires, grande rencontre économique de post-crise, que sont la CGEC Academy en 2021 et le CIO Forum de cette année. Et tout cela, bien sûr, aujourd'hui, plus que jamais également, ces différents forums nous indiquent que cette mise en chantier de production de l'Afrique ne peut pas se faire uniquement par des investissements directs étrangers, elle ne peut pas se faire exclusivement par des investisseurs locaux, c'est un mix des deux. Les deux parties doivent se mettre ensemble et c'est pour cela, entre autres, que la prochaine édition de la CGEC Academy d'octobre 2022, qui aura lieu donc dans quelques mois, sera une édition également ouverte au monde puisqu'elle abritera la rencontre des patronats francophones du monde.
Dont vous avez été élu président, si je ne me trompe pas.
Vice-président de la zone Afrique de l'Ouest. Vice-président de la zone Afrique de l'Ouest, qui regroupe donc les patronats de l'ensemble du monde, aussi bien d'Amérique, d'Europe que d'Asie, et tous ces pays qui ont en partage la langue française. Bien sûr, la langue française n'est pas un critère, je dirais, exclusif et suffisant de business, mais le partage de la même langue est une base, peut être un élément de facilitation que nous devons exploiter.
Dans la compréhension des problématiques, merci infiniment de ce temps que vous nous avez donné, M. Jean-Marie Aka. Donc, on vous souhaite bonne chance pour la suite, bonne chance pour les rencontres. On a compris que c'est un redynamisme qui s'opère face aux défis, aux turbulences que l'on reçoit ici. Merci infiniment de
Merci à
votre
vous
visite.
et encore bravo à l'Africa CEO Forum.
Excellent. Merci, bon forum à vous aussi. Donc, nous étions avec M. Jean-Marie Akal, président de la Confédération Générale des Entreprises de Côte d'Ivoire, la CGCI, le patron des patrons, comme on aime à le dire, et qui nous a donné effectivement sa lecture de ce rendez-vous. On poursuit notre expérience de ce forum et nous allons aller, je crois, si je ne me trompe pas, du côté de la plénière dans le Africa Hall, dans cette conversation avec Mamadou Sangafoua Koulibaly et Luca Vignati. Bonne conversation à vous. On se retrouve tout à l'heure.
Thank you, Larry. I'm going to speak in French, of course. As
Down
you
it.
know, French is our official language, even though I can understand a little bit what you are saying in English.
A little bit. He's fully bilingual. He's being modest.
D'abord, je voudrais vous remercier, remercier les organisateurs du CEO Forum. Je crois qu'il y a sa 10e édition et comme l'a dit le chef de l'État à l'ouverture, qui était un véritable succès, ne serait-ce que par la participation des patrons d'entreprises à travers le continent. Ceci étant, pour revenir à la question que Larry vient de nous poser, à savoir le rôle du gaz dans le mix énergétique dans notre pays, je crois que pour un pays comme la Côte d'Ivoire, et je crois que ce n'est pas différent des autres pays africains, nous sommes très heureux des découvertes qui se font ça et là à travers le continent. D'après les chiffres qui m'ont été communiqués, le continent regorge d'au moins 7,6% du potentiel de gaz identifié à travers le monde, à savoir 14 400 milliards de pieds cubes. Et ça, c'est une opportunité pour notre continent. Et nous sommes heureux de savoir qu'après la COP26, le gaz qui avait été identifié comme une source à bannir est redevenu une énergie propre. Et pour cela, nous voudrons indiquer qu'en ce qui concerne la Côte d'Ivoire, nous avons un objectif très clair. C'est qu'à l'horizon 2030, le gaz va représenter 55% de notre mix énergétique contre 45% des énergies nouvelles et renouvelables. Donc c'est un gaz qui va jouer un rôle crucial dans le mix énergétique pour notre pays, pour les années à venir et peut-être même bien au-delà. Quand vous prenez l'histoire de l'énergie dans le monde, c'est vrai que le monde industriel s'est basé sur le charbon, après qui est un peu plus polluant que le pétrole. Et je crois qu'on est tous d'accord que le gaz est moins polluant que le pétrole. Donc c'est pour cela que je pense que c'est une source d'énergie qui va jouer un rôle crucial dans la transition énergétique. Maintenant, le long du panel, nous pourrons voir ensemble quelle doit être la position africaine, parce que justement, il faut que l'Afrique ait une position, parce que notre continent a besoin, plus que jamais, de ses ressources pour se développer enfin. Merci beaucoup pour votre question.
Merci. And that's an important place to pick it up because after the Ukraine war, Luca, we've seen that gas has become a strategic asset, maybe more than ever, because of the supply constraints and all of the geopolitical concerns with Russia and Ukraine. So reacting to the previous panel and also what the minister said, before we get into the recent oil discovery, where do you sit?
Good morning, everybody, first of all. Thank you for the question. It's extremely true, Larry, that in the present condition, while the gas was already considered the transition fluid from the oil to a cleaner energy, nowadays is becoming more and more evident because we do have also an issue in energy security. And I believe that Africa is very much the source of important gas reserves. and also geographically is very, very well positioned because the market is Europe, so it's just north of Africa, and in some cases, just a few hundred kilometers from the source to the needs.
Right.
So I believe that is, if you allow me, double strategically because of the position and because of the huge quantities of gas. So I strongly believe that, we strongly believe actually that Africa will play a major role, not only in time-wise, but also quantity-wise, because there is an evident hole in the gas supply. All over Europe, I do not want to extend to Far East because it was already in a very, very strong needs, but the shortcut will be Europe.
Right. And so we're very close, like you're saying, we're very close to Europe, so where the gas is likely to be produced and where the greatest need is, it's a short distance. And so based on that, what is the significance of the recent Ivorian discovery in terms of energy security for this country?
The importance of the Baleine discovery that we made last year in August, September, as you mentioned, is both related to the energy security in terms of gas for the country and also opportunity for exporting oil. As you correctly sized during your introduction, is a major discovery. Is more than 2 billion barrels of oil with a quite an important amount of associated gas. That as for our way of doing our dual flag approach as ENI, we always, first of all, fulfill the domestic requirement, and then when and if there will be some export capacity, we work with the country in order to export. In this very case, it's not the case for the export. Minister is fully aligned. They will be fully devoted to the domestic market, and of course, to power production, as we saw from the previous panel. So in order to be short, answering you is a very, very strategic to us because it was marking a very important discovery after 20 years of no discovery done in this country.
Right.
So we believe that it will open a new phase, a new sector with a new different geological model. And secondly, we will be gladly supply gas to the domestic market because I was told even yesterday that the demand increase is more than 5-6% every single year. So we need really to rush up in developing our discovery in order not to disappoint authorities and the hosting countries.
So Minister Coulibaly, are you ready to make some announcements about how soon there will be full production when it can benefit the people of Côte d'Ivoire?
Ça, c'est une bonne question, mais je pense que la question est beaucoup plus adressée à mon ami de ENI. Mais ce que je dois dire après la découverte du mois d'août, je pense que les essais vont commencer. Ils nous ont promis dès 2023 et puis ils seront en pleine production autour de 2026. Ce que nous essayons d'obtenir d'eux, c'est de raccourcir au maximum ce délai parce que, comme il l'a dit, la demande locale, on a une croissance de demande qui est de l'ordre de 8%. Aujourd'hui, on me dit que c'est passé à 10%. Et cela ne devait surprendre personne compte tenu des investissements que nous enregistrons, aussi bien publics que privés, mais aussi la forte demande au niveau des foyers. Nous pensons qu'il faut que nous soyons à même de satisfaire cette demande croissante. Et c'est le gaz, justement, associé au pétrole qui vient d'être découvert qui va permettre de compléter nos besoins en gaz.
All right. Has this changed how you're approaching your job as Minister for Mines and Oil and Energy? Because you were only recently appointed, but by the time you were getting appointed, this was still recent news. So in terms of how you plan to carry out your work, knowing there's this big project that's under your ministry, how are you thinking through what needs to be done?
Je pense que, comme il l'a indiqué, Nous, nous voulons, dans le partenariat que nous avons avec ENI, y compris avec ceux qui sont là avant ENI, même s'ils ont la plus grande découverte, c'est d'abord de satisfaire la demande locale. La planification pour nous, vous savez, indépendamment du choc, parce qu'on a eu un choc en 2021 qui est lié à des soucis techniques pour la plupart, il y a une trajectoire déjà de notre plan de développement énergie qui est, à mon avis, un plan bien élaboré. Nous allons simplement parer au plus pressé et puis essayer d'actualiser ce plan de développement d'énergie dans notre pays. Et je peux dire que les récentes découvertes, notamment la plus grande découverte qui vient d'être opérée, nous rassurent sur le fait que nous pourrons satisfaire la demande locale, mais ne l'oublions pas, la Côte d'Ivoire est un hub énergétique. Nous fournissons de l'énergie aussi aux voisins. C'est vrai que les soucis que nous avons eus récemment ont un peu baissé la quantité d'énergie que nous fournissons aux voisins, mais avec ces découvertes, nous devrons pouvoir satisfaire aussi bien les besoins nationaux que les besoins régionaux.
D'accord. Mr. Vignati, so he kind of sent the question back to you about full production. I was not going to let it slide. Are you ready to make any announcements here?
Let me let's say, provide you a bit of background. No?
Right.
We said that the discovery was done August, September last year, that is a few months back. And what is important to us is also to note that in few months ahead, we'll be starting the phase one production. So in the second quarter to 2023, we start the production for oil and gas for phase one. And this one, if you count down, is less than 2 years and it is 1 year plus. And in terms of time to market, reaching even the shore with the gas pipe and so on is an extremely challenging benchmark. And then, of course, I do confirm that the full production will be by 2026. It's not a secret that we are continuously looking at accelerating because creating value for the stakeholders is our main target. And, but let me also take this opportunity to say that a fast track of 15, 18 months from a discovery, even to a first phase, was only possible because of the stakeholder support. Having a plan of development approved in 3 weeks is amazing. So this is to say that we need always the concurrence of authorities and countries, that they do believe that the discovery done can change the internal panorama. Otherwise, by our own, we will never meet those targets. So this is to say that we are working in Africa, we are working for Africa, but they are working for us. So that's to me is very important, because by your own, you will always play your own song, but there will not be music along.
Right.
So that's very important. I would like to take the opportunity to thank the minister and all the staff, and also the partner, the national partner that has been supporting and setting our guidelines. And so far, they are bringing evident results.
And this will be Africa's first carbon neutral development. Why, how important is that?
Sorry, one more time.
This will be Africa's first carbon neutral development?
Yes, this is going to be the first African project that we are aware of, at least nobody was outing so, being scope 1 and scope 2 net zero, starting with. So it's quite an important achievement, because if we want to reach the zero carbon by 2050, we only don't need to retrofit what is already producing, but we need also to start with the good step for the new development. And this one for ENI and for Ivory Coast will be the first project. And as I said, also for the entire continent. So that's true.
All right, related to that, Honorable Minister, we have COP27 coming back to Africa in a couple of months, coming back to African soil, and so obviously the climate change conversation is an important one. We've seen, obviously, the war in Ukraine and how that has made, excuse me, like I was saying before, and gas has become a strategic asset How are you thinking through these issues? Well, Cote d'Ivoire's position going into Egypt for COP27 vis-à-vis your recent discovery that you obviously want to exploit as quickly as possible?
Merci beaucoup, Larry. Je pense que ça, c'est une question importante. Je voulais déjà dire merci à Luca pour les efforts qu'ils sont prêts à faire pour qu'ils rentrent en phase de production le plus rapidement possible. Et je peux l'assurer de notre soutien pour que la phase de production puisse être raccourcie si c'est possible. Ensuite, pour ce qui va se passer en Égypte pour la COP 27, je pense que les pays africains, comme ils ont l'habitude de le faire, pourront parler d'une voix en tirant leçon de ce qui s'est passé pendant les autres COP. Bon, je dois dire que dans une vie antérieure, moi j'ai suivi la COP 21, la COP 22 en tant que ministre de l'Agriculture. Vous savez, la question du réchauffement de la planète est une question globale. La solution ne peut qu'être globale. Et le plus souvent, les solutions sont mises sous la table sans qu'on ne prenne suffisamment en compte les contraintes des uns et des autres. Si je prends le continent africain, tout le monde est d'accord que nous ne polluons pratiquement pas. 4% du gaz émis, 4% seulement. Je disais à l'époque, si même nous arrivons au niveau de l'Afrique à faire 0 émission et que les gros pollueurs continuent sur leur tendance, ça ne va rien changer dans le réchauffement de la planète. Mais alors, à l'époque, je suis sûr que ces chiffres ont évolué, mais Larry, je vais vous dire, en 2016, 56 États les plus affectés, les plus impactés par le réchauffement de la planète, sur les 56 États au monde les plus affectés par le réchauffement de la planète, 36 étaient recensés en Afrique. Voilà un continent qui n'émet pas de gaz à effet de serre, mais qui est le plus impacté au monde. Ça, c'est vraiment, on allait dire, une injustice climatique. Alors, la position africaine est simple. À l'époque, nous avons dit, s'il y a des financements pour l'adaptation, c'est bien pour les pays, pour l'atténuation, c'est bien pour les pays qui polluent, mais nous, en Afrique, nous avons besoin de financements pour l'adaptation. Aujourd'hui, nous, Africains, nous découvrons, et c'est pas la Côte d'Ivoire n'est pas le seul pays, le Sénégal a été cité, il y a beaucoup de découvertes qui se font ça et là, et c'est en ce moment, on nous dit, au moment où nous avons une population, la plus forte population, de croissance de population, avec une frange des jeunes qui sont de plus en plus nombreux, et l'énergie aujourd'hui est devenue une source vitale comme l'eau. Donc nous, Africains, nous avons besoin de cette énergie pour notre croissance et pour notre développement. Nous ne polluons pas, on ne peut pas prendre des décisions. Vous savez, il faut être réaliste. Si vous prenez des décisions alors que les gens sont dans une posture de survie, ça ne marchera pas. Moi, par exemple, quand j'étais au ministère de l'Agriculture, on demandait aux paysans de faire de l'agriculture responsable. Mais vous savez, nous avons connu des moments difficiles ici en Côte d'Ivoire. Quand on a remis les semences aux paysans, c'était pour produire. Mais quand ils ont eu faim, ils étaient dans une situation de survie, ils ont consommé la semence. Donc c'est pareil pour l'énergie. Il faut que la solution soit globale et qu'elle prenne en compte les contraintes des uns des autres. Pour terminer sur ce point, l'Afrique a intérêt, comme elle l'a toujours fait ici, de parler d'une seule voix. Et je peux vous assurer qu'à la COP 27, nous allons parler d'une voix pour que nous puissions mettre sur la table les contraintes et l'intérêt aussi de l'Afrique.
Based on that hypocrisy you talk about the West, we are the least polluters, but we are the worst affected by climate change. They are not ponying up the money for climate change adaptation and mitigation. So should we, even as a continent, should Côte d'Ivoire commit yourselves to the energy transition when you are contributing the least to the world getting in this situation where it will be unlivable? Should we commit ourselves as Africans to the energy transition the same way other big Western nations are?
Non, justement, c'est de ça que je parle. On ne peut pas aller au même rythme. C'est impossible. Déjà, je vous dis, je vais vous donner un exemple. Nous, à la COP 21, tout le monde a eu beaucoup d'espoir. Mais à la COP 22, l'espoir s'est un peu amenuisé. Pourquoi? Parce qu'entre les deux COP, il y a eu un changement aux États-Unis. Le président Donald Trump est clairement un climato-sceptique. Du coup, tous ces grands pays qui étaient, les gros pollueurs qui étaient prêts sous la pression des États-Unis à l'époque avec Obama et puis la France, tout le monde a commencé à se rétracter. Et du coup, c'est comme si le changement climatique nous attendait. Dieu merci, on est heureux aujourd'hui qu'avec les États-Unis, il y a encore, les gens poussent pour qu'on règle la question du climat. Mais on ne peut pas demander aux pays africains qui ne polluent pas de laisser les ressources, qui sont des ressources vitales pour le continent, alors que nous pouvons les utiliser et puis avoir une empreinte zéro carbone, puisque avec le projet DENI, il l'a dit, à côté de leur production, ils vont faire de la forêt, ils vont planter des arbres qui vont pouvoir capter aussi du carbone. Donc, le projet aura pour objectif d'avoir zéro impact carbone. Donc, toutes ces choses sont possibles. Mais on ne peut pas commencer à restreindre les financements et donc faire en sorte que le continent ne puisse pas développer son économie à partir de ces richesses découvertes. Je me réjouis d'ailleurs que l'Europe regarde désormais vers le continent africain pour subvenir à ses besoins énergétiques. Donc ça veut dire qu'on a un intérêt commun. Si on se met autour de la table, qu'on prend les contraintes des uns des autres, je suis sûr qu'on va trouver une solution. Pour ce qui est du financement, il faut savoir que les banques africaines s'organisent aussi. Je pense qu'à quelque chose malheur est bon, il était temps que nos banques s'organisent pour financer les besoins de développement du continent.
The ministers made a very strong statement on this, and its energy needs. These are life and death issues here on the continent, Mr. Vignati. E&I has an energy transition strategy. You're aiming for net zero carbon emissions by 2050. Is that even attainable? And considering, let's just be honest, energy companies like yourselves are contributing more than most to the climate emergency we're in right now. So is this just an empty platitude?
I believe that the 250 is feasible, and of course it will not be only based on the hydrocarbon fossil energy, but we have a mix of different contributions that will bring us to have the net zero scope 1, 2, and 3 by 250. Of course, it is a quite long journey. We are targeting and implementing several measures that they go from the biofuel, from carbon capture, sequestration, renewable energies, biofuel, as I said. So there are many contributing factors that, according to our estimation and targets and commitment, I should say, they will bring us to 250. Of course, we have been defining also intermediate dates whereby stakeholders and shareholders can validate, can prove that what we are saying is what we are doing, and vice versa. And we do believe that the just transition is the only way forward. I believe that the minister described very, very well, was only missing the title. He described perfectly the just transition. We cannot think as a Western countries to transit by our own, leaving aside all the other ones that have been supporting so far.
Right.
So this is not what we do envisage, is not what we are doing. And we need to keep going along all together, maybe different speeds, different timing of implementation, but nobody can be left behind, because otherwise it will be an half transition that will not work, because the world is one single entity. So having something that is perfect and something that doesn't work, the conclusion will bring something that doesn't work.
Right.
So we need everybody to be involved with their own capacity, capabilities, resource, timing, financing, with a common target. Otherwise, it will be lost in the water, this main target that collectively we are embracing.
Fantastic.
Larry,
Yes, sir.
juste pour appuyer ce que vient de dire Lucas, vous savez, les pays, je l'ai dit, hein, je prends le continent tout africain tout entier, il pollue pratiquement pas. Mais si on veut atteindre, puisque le phénomène du changement climatique est un phénomène global, comme je l'ai dit, donc on doit être à la ligne d'arrivée ensemble. Mais les points de départ ne sont pas pareils. Les pays qui émettent beaucoup de gaz et qui ont contribué massivement à la pollution, pour ne pas les citer, on les connaît très bien. Donc c'est à eux d'aller plus vite pour que leur rythme doit être beaucoup plus accéléré parce qu'ils ont beaucoup d'impact sur le réchauffement climatique par rapport à des continents comme le nôtre, c'est ce que j'ai dit, et encore qui sont dans la phase de développement, donc qui ont besoin de cette énergie pour leur décollage économique. Maintenant, les énergies alternatives qui sont proposées, tant que ces énergies alternatives ne seront pas accessibles et elles ne seront pas durables, accessibles en termes physiques, mais aussi accessibles en termes financiers, elles ne seront pas durables, bon, l'Afrique n'aura pas le choix que de se baser sur ses ressources naturelles aujourd'hui pour négocier sa transition énergétique. Ça me paraît évident. Et je crois que aller à des conférences et puis croire qu'on pourra obtenir d'autres résultats, c'est vraiment tourner en rond parce que, comme je l'ai dit, c'est une question de survie pour le continent et donc on n'aura pas le choix. Et je pense que nous devons aller avec nos partenaires occidentaux et je crois qu'ils doivent faire beaucoup d'efforts qu'ils en ont consenti jusqu'ici pour qu'on puisse être à la ligne d'arrivée ensemble. Je vous remercie.
All right. Listen, I have about 2 minutes left, so I can take 1 or 2 quick questions from the audience. If you have a burning question, this is the time to say it, or I'm just going to keep asking questions. Going once. Okay. Sir, over here, please get a mic to him real quick. And I might only have time for him before we have to wrap up the panel.
Hello, my name is Jean César. I work at Business France here in the French Embassy in Ivory Coast. My question is for the Minister. Is there a specific policy concerning local content with the arrival of this new oil and gas industry for Ivory Coast? Thank you.
Bon, je pense que Eni n'en a pas parlé, mais effectivement, nous avons un contenu local pour tout ce que nous faisons pour l'industrie extractive en Côte d'Ivoire. On a passé récemment au niveau une loi sur le contenu local au niveau du pétrole. On est en train de préparer une autre loi pour les mines. C'est important parce que quand vous tirez de la richesse à partir d'une localité donnée, si vous voulez continuer de profiter durablement de cette richesse, il est important de s'assurer qu'elle est équitablement répartie. Bon, je dis équitablement parce que tout le monde sait très bien que ce sont des industries capitalistiques et qu'on a besoin de beaucoup de ressources pour pouvoir faire les découvertes. Ce sont des ressources qui très souvent ne sont pas à la portée de nos entreprises locales. Mais quand une découverte est faite, c'est bon qu'on s'assure qu'elle bénéficie à ceux qui ont fait les investissements de départ, mais aussi à ceux sur le territoire desquels la découverte a été réalisée, d'une part. D'autre part, notre pays est dans une position qui lui permet de tirer les leçons du passé des autres pays qui ont d'abord basé leur développement sur les ressources extractives et qui souvent ont conduit malheureusement à des désastres. nous, notre chance, c'est que nous avons basé le développement de notre pays sur l'agriculture. Donc, les ressources sont diversifiées. Nous n'allons pas, parce que nous avons commencé à découvrir des richesses sur le sous-sol, abandonner l'agriculture, loin s'en faut. Ouais. Mais surtout, je voulais insister, nous n'allons pas constituer des rentes qui vont faire l'objet de convoitises et qui peuvent, à la limite aussi, être source de conflits, y compris entre les fils d'un même pays. C'est cette leçon-là que nous allons tirer pour essayer de bâtir une industrie extractive qui soit inclusive et qui puisse supporter le développement de notre pays.
All right. I'm afraid we have to leave it there. Please give a big round of applause to Luca Vignati, and Minister Sangafoa Coulibaly. Thanks a lot. Merci beaucoup. Right. I mentioned before that the UN Climate Change Conference 2022 is coming back to the African continent. COP27 will be in Sharm el-Sheikh this November. And this gentleman, the next keynote speaker, has said there will be no room for useless promises, pledges, and buzzwords. So he means business. Please welcome the former Minister for Environment Investment for Egypt, a veteran economist, and now the UN Climate Change High-Level Champion for Egypt, Dr. Mahmoud Mohieldin. Thank you, sir. He is going to give a lecture, and then we have some questions and answers right after this. So please stay in the room. We'll hear from Dr. Mohieldin, and then I'll take your questions right after his lecture. Sir, please go ahead. Yes, straight to the lectern, sir. Okay.
Right. Thank you so much for this opportunity to address you all today. I've been listening carefully to this panel, and it gave me some additional points of emphasis on what we should be expecting at COP27 in Egypt. Speaking as well earlier to Ms. Eleni Giokos, the anchor from CNN, we met only a few weeks ago in the GCC countries, and it was like ages ago. It's a fast-changing world, so we really get all of these fast-changing, affecting the people, their lives and livelihoods, and we need to factor that in when we're discussing the climate agenda. So let me share with you the following, based on the discussion that I have been part of and listening to during the last sessions of the day and yesterday as well. You can really see Africa as the most disciplined continent when it comes to climate and climate action. If the world is only one continent, if you have emissions of 3%, this could really be handled well and managed well at the same time, and that could be put under control. But we are not alone in this world. We know that Africa is 3%. You multiply that by 10, you have China. You multiply this by almost 5, you get US emissions, and then this is unfair world. Because if you check the other Africa we're talking about, Africa not the discipline, but Africa the victim of the impact of climate change on all aspects of life. If you check the indices of climate risk, many African countries will be at the top. If we check the indices of hunger, malnutrition, vulnerability of coastal areas, again, African countries will be at the top. But there is a third aspect beyond being disciplined and victim. It's the opportunities that could really be provided by Africa and the solution that can and should come from Africa. The new technologies in a world that claims to be putting more investments and emphasis on sustainability and digitalization, most of the raw material are available in Africa. So the call for localization and being a substantive contributor to the supply chain with higher value added contribution, that will be making sense. And if we are concerned about the global carbon footprint, it's better to localize industries with value added where the raw material is as well. When you want to diversify more the sources of inputs to the supply chain, Africa is a good candidate between the East and the West. In addition to that, you check the opportunities when you see the continent is on top of the solar atlas and the wind atlas, and many of the biggest projects in the world now happens to be hosted in the African continent. With new initiatives and technology, you see the Green Hydrogen Alliance formed in Barcelona just a few weeks ago with the leadership of 6 African countries, and coinciding with it at the same time pushing for standardization of the industry for the climate agenda to be clean, and for green hydrogen to be with 100% clean sources. So what that all means for the COP in Egypt, COP27, the first, it should be on the holistic approach. Africa cannot afford a reductionist approach to climate, so we need to deal with mitigation, adaptation, implications on loss and damage, issues related to finance. The second part is basically about the implementation and projectizing the great ideas as been introduced. I think we had enough of nice buzzwords, claims of love and affection of people and the planet, but with very limited impact on projects and changes in investment. The third, it's the advantage of Egypt being an active regional partner. It's part of Africa. Egypt is part of the Arab world. Egypt is part of the Mediterranean, with excellent political and economic relations around the world. So the regional dimension will be emphasized with an idea for matchmaking and creation of markets and investment opportunities. And then the fourth aspect that we're expecting is basically the full ownership of the climate agenda and the climate action, from the grassroots to the summits and its solutions. The very final point is basically how to finance all of that. Some of us, and for good reasons, are still chasing the $100 billion, the promise of Copenhagen, which, even if it is fulfilled fully, even if it is going to be multiplied by a factor of 2 or 5 or even 10, is not going to be sufficient to finance the climate action agenda. So the best thing then is basically to seek business partnership where the private sector can really provide a great deal of support and be part of the return, as it will be part, of course, of sharing the cost and the risks. So this will be a good call for the business sector to do more in the mitigation front, or the race to zero, and on the adaptation front, where the role of the business sector needs to be better and clearly defined. In addition to that, the new agenda would require more opportunities for the financial sector in the form of the institution responsible for risk management and insurance, not just insurance sector as provider of long-term finance, but in helping in risk management, risk mitigation, and pricing risk, and indeed providing opportunities for underwriting. It is also important that we need to give the opportunities when it comes to adaptation to more grants, more concessional finance for the multilateral development banks, and not to borrow more for fixing other people's and other countries' problem. My very final point is basically that there are many solutions, including debt reduction mechanism. We know that around the world there had been unprecedented increase of debts. We don't need to indebt Africa further. And actually there are many good tools in finance and innovation in finance that could be used to reduce debt exposure, and at the same time provide opportunities for the business sector to do a better job, and at the same time hit the objectives of the climate action when it comes to the different opportunities in the race to resilience and race to zero. Having said that, there will be many events and opportunities leading to the road in the COP in Africa, in Egypt, including 5 regional roundtables on business sector and private sector partnerships. There will be a meeting dedicated for finance and investments from the 7th to the 9th of September in Egypt. I'm happy as well that during this very important gathering here for the African CEOs, we managed to have some good alignment, understanding with the likes of IFC, AFC, Global Compact, and many partners, including BCG. I think we are up to a very good and practical solutions-based conference and summit, and focusing on projects with impact and with good adherence to the rules of engagement with high standards, and avoiding, definitely, greenwashing. Thank you so much for listening, and looking forward to welcoming you all in Egypt, in Sharm el-Sheikh. Thank you.
Dr. Mohieldin, thanks a lot. Please come and join me over here and we'll take some questions. Appreciate that overview of how he's approaching COP27 in Sharm el-Sheikh. Beautiful Sharm el-Sheikh. I look forward to being there with you to talk about and to cover that for the world. And if you have a question in the audience, please stay with me for a second, because I just wanted to pick up on something, Dr. Mohieldin, you said, that there have been a lot of claims of love and affection for the people and for the planet, but there's been very little action. And that's been something that's been in every COP meeting, in every climate discussion. We go back to the same point, don't we?
Right. So let's be based on evidence. When I said this, I think I made some people unhappy. But let's start with the famous $100 billion, the old promise of Copenhagen. Until this moment, we didn't really fulfill this target. Last year in Glasgow, it was announced that the world had reached $79 billion. This was by a committee affiliated with the OECD. But this figure had been challenged by many think tanks, research centers, and Oxfam, because it may suffer really from some sort of double counting and even more than that. But the idea here is basically, even in that kind of a figure that may have sound nice and good and round figure to good as a good start back in 2009, but we are not in 2009 anymore.
Right.
We are now with better evidence to tell us that only in one area, which is energy, that you were just discussing a moment ago, based on the IEA, the International Energy Agency, we need more than $3.5 trillion a year just to do the just transition kind of investments. I'm not talking about adaptation, I'm not talking about impact on community, I'm not talking about compensation for those who could be affected by these kind of transitions. So I think here this is one part that we should be focusing on. When you claim, when you try to impress the audience and the sophisticated anchors and the media and want to make some good news, please make sure that you mean what you are talking about, because you will be monitored, you will be accountable, your words will be haunting you forever.
Fantastic. If you have questions for Dr. Mohieldin in the audience, please raise your hand and we will take them now. We will get a mic into the crowd. If you have any questions about COP27, there's a mic going around the crowd. Okay, Eleni wants to ask a question.
Here we go.
Hello, sir. Really good to see you again.
Thank you.
You know, I've done so many of these panels. I'm Eleni Jokos from CNN. I've done so many of these panels, and I've spoken to so many island nation leaders. And when I ask the question about, you know, whether they're being heard, they laugh on stage in front of the audience. And they say that they just don't take seriously the commitments, firstly, by the developed world. Money has not been filtering through. Number two, and then also they feel that they are being held to a higher bar and standard when it comes to carbon emissions and green economy versus the biggest emitters. How do we get more African voices and also emerging market voices to ensure that they are heard at these conferences? Because it feels like, and they've said to me, that they're just talking to brick walls at this point in time.
Right. The old say in the corporate world is telling us that if you don't have a seat at the table, you'll be part of the menu. And the problem is here that we are talking in silos. The business, the growing and the more sophisticated business community that we see in Africa, emerging markets and developing economies are not necessarily taking part of the global discussion that basically shaping the priorities of policymakers and the investment banks and the asset managers. So I think it's an open call here in my capacity as the climate champion for COP27. There are alliances like the Race to Zero, the Race to Resilience, many coalitions in different sectors. I know how busy you are as business people. Through your aggregators, federations of industry, especially if you are a small and medium enterprise, through your investment community, try to make sure that you are part of this alliance. And it's an open invitation. You need to just to check the website of the UNFCCC. It's basically about how to be a member in any of these campaigns as relevant to your business. Then the other thing, that there are many sectoral and geographic-based coalitions that are focusing on policy, matters related to regulations, standard setting. I was just sharing earlier that there are very important committee commissioned by the Secretary General of the UN, led by the former Minister of Climate and Environment, Ms. McKenna, and it's basically about putting the standards, codes, and procedures to avoid greenwashing. So if you are in the business here, financial or non-financial sector, if you are not aware of what's happening there, there's going to be regulations and supervisory issues affecting your business tomorrow. So, and this is an opportunity again to participate in this. What will shape the business are basically four things, and very quickly. The convictions of the CEOs of what's good and how to do well at the same time. The second is the non-price competition between different businesses, claiming that they are doing a better job when it comes to greening the business and making it more compatible with the Paris Agreement. The third is basically the compliance with the regulatory framework, which is going to be a very strong and influential one. Why? It's because of the fourth point, that the general public is growing with awareness of the importance of what they should really be doing better to protect the lives and the livelihoods. And that's why, even if you don't believe in any of the three above, not in your regulators, not in competition, not in your own conviction as a firm, but basically it's the voice of the general public that is impacting business and making it shifting in different ways. So it's better to be part of this movement rather than complaining that you were not part of setting the agenda.
All right, thank you, Dr. Muhyiddin. I think we had a question in the audience there from the lady who... Okay, I think her question was probably answered, but this gentleman here has a question right in front.
Hello, I'm Dr. Alan Pamba from Roche. My question, you might have answered it, but probably follows up a little bit on Eleni's question. How does Africa chart its climate agenda free of external influence, recognizing the balance between climate agenda and the economic evolution that Africa needs? In a world where we contribute about 3% to global trade, we are highly in debt and highly vulnerable to be dictated to what the agenda shall be.
I think the starting point is basically what you just said now, that based on evidence, you need to say, well, it's basically the three areas that I said, emphasizing that you have been very disciplined as continent, as countries, and the contribution to the emissions have been highlighted several times. But what are the implications of that? Should I borrow in order to fix the problems that you caused to me?
Right.
And what kind of efficiency and what kind of fairness rules here that could govern that? The second thing is basically trying to get all of the evidence, as much as we can, of the vulnerability of cities and the requirements for adaptation in order to see if the loss and damage file can help us, or more important than money is the technology which we started to get some benefits from in the mitigation front, but less so in the adaptation front. And Africa requires more in the adaptation than in the mitigation. It needs both, but now we know our way in the mitigation. We know how can we get good partnerships in the business and creating energy, solar plants, and all of that. The very final point, that you have great advantage, or we have, as I'm proud African, we have the great advantage, the vast land, the opportunities of the natural resources, that most of the components required for the two waves of change in our world, be them digital and sustainable, they are available in our land not far from where we are here. So we need to enhance the bargaining power and unleash the potential of competition with insistence of having contribution on the value-added side, not just to export raw material. And there is a hefty competition there that we can benefit from between China, US, between Europe and the rest of the world. So it's in our advantage. And just to give you one simple example, on the energy sector, now the leaders in the green hydrogen today are now from African countries. 6 countries formed this alliance that was launched in Barcelona. Those leaders at the same time insisted on standards for clean energy. Those leaders have been approached, and you'll be seeing many Europeans knocking in your doors, especially if you have the green hydrogen or natural gas that suddenly became a transitional clean energy. So here you need really to use this advantage of Europe and other advanced economies around the world trying to find better diversified and better access to energy with affordable prices. I think the bargaining position is shifting better now to Africa, and we need to maximize on it. Be fair. I mean, no, we are not going to exploit the needs, but basically we need to be fair in this game.
All right, and that is why you say Africa cannot afford a reductionist approach to climate.
Exactly, because the reductionist approach is very simple. People said sustainability means climate action. Climate action means mitigation. Mitigation means carbon and carbon pricing. Missing the rest of the story. Where is the rest of the SDGs? When I want to create job opportunities, when I want to have gender to be included in my agenda, where I should be dealing with poverty and how to finance the whole thing. A holistic approach will not just deal with mitigation and adaptation, loss and damage and finance, but will put that in a context of political economy to help our continent dealing with all of the challenges, including the one that you just mentioned, by just being holistic and practical in the approach and evidence-based.
I think we can all agree that Dr. Mahmoud Mohieldin is going to put the world on notice in Sharm el-Sheikh this November.
Thank you so much.
We're looking forward to it. A big round of applause to
with your help and support. Thank you so much.
Dr. Mahmoud Mohieldin, the UN Climate High-Level Champion for Egypt. We look forward to being there this November.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. And now it is my pleasure. Where is she? She was here somewhere, to introduce my dear friend and colleague, Eleni Jokos, CNN anchor and correspondent. Okay, yes, she's there. No pimples, no wrinkles, never had a bad hair day. And she's going to be in conversation with the CEO of the MSC, Mediterranean Shipping Company, Soren Toft. Eleni?
Thank you so much, Larry. I'm always delighted to be introduced by you.
Only the best introductions for you.
Events. Thank you so much. Great to see all of you, and fantastic to be here at the Africa CEO Forum. We had a fantastic first day, and we're halfway through the second day, and the conversations have been very illuminating and inspiring as well as we try and navigate some of the tough challenges. But I'm so excited for our next conversation. We have a one-on-one with Soren Toft, the CEO of MSC. Soren, please join me on stage. Thank you. Fantastic to see you. Thank you for coming through. Have you been to Abidjan before?
It's my first time, actually.
Is it your first time? And
me.
what do you think of this fabulous city? Have you been out?
To be honest, I haven't seen much. So, but
We've got to take this man out of the conference hall, guys. Really good to see you. You know, MSC is a company that we all follow, I think. It is absolutely vital to Africa, at least. You've got a huge history here from the 1970s, you know, being one of the first to link Antwerp with Mogadishu. But it's been such an incredible journey, and I think the most exciting thing now, and I'm going to get right into it, is your acquisition of Bolloré Logistics. I know that it's still under regulatory approval, so it's yet to happen. $6 billion worth, and everyone's asking the question, why? We kind of know you want to be plugged in more into the growth story on the continent, but tell us in your own words.
Sure, thank you, and thank you for having me. And let's jump right into it, because as you said, I mean, we have a long and proud history in Africa. We've been here for more than 50 years, and we absolutely see the future of Africa right in front of us. Secondly, Bolloré has, in their own history, built an amazing company. And when the family owner behind it decided, that they were going to potentially part with this, we said, we can't let such a great asset go by the wayside. So we think we would be a great owner to stand on the shoulders of the great company that they have built and really to develop it into the future. They are a very recognized player in Africa. They've been here for a long, long time. We are a growth company. We have a lot of ships on order. We have a lot of appetite for growth. Africa is a growing continent, as we've heard over the last day and a half. Population is growing dramatically. I think this is a fabulous combination.
That's the most optimistic outlook I've heard in the last 2 days, I have to say. Your appetite for growth, and you and I spoke actually yesterday, and you were saying that traditionally you've always been a player that focuses on organic growth, but you've been spending some money. You guys have been buying a lot of assets. It's hard to not notice, right? From ferries to airlines. It is incredible to see. A lot of ships. I think you guys now are officially the biggest ship owner in the world. Tell me why you've been on this massive acquisition path, because if you're spending this money, you're thinking that the future is looking bright.
Well, in fact, we've been spending money, it's correct, but our biggest thrust for the future is really the organic growth that we're having. I mean, the number of ships that we have in order is really to propel our organic growth. But it's true, we've gone through a year and a half, 2 years of good fortunes for our industry. Finally, I would say, after a couple of decades living off very meager returns and at the same time having to invest billions every year just to keep the ships afloat, so to speak. And what we have done is we've said, well, we're going to continue the organic growth path, but now that we have had better fortunes, there are a few interesting assets to pick up. Assets that fits our strategy. We are a shipping company, that's our core, and it will always be our core, but around it we are building a number of associated and related businesses. We are already in terminals today through our company TIL. Bolloré brings another 22 concessions to the family, so we thought that was a perfect match for us.
I'm so glad you mentioned the terminals, because I think there's a lot of questions. I mean, analysts are looking at this acquisition and asking, what weight did you give the terminals to this acquisition? Because are they the big prize for you in Africa as you embark on this acquisition of Bolloré?
For sure, the biggest piece in Bolloré Africa Logistics are the terminals. And I think we've also heard over the past day or so that infrastructure in Africa is critical. So we come from saying we're going to take these additional pieces of infrastructure over, but we're not going to stop there. We're going to keep developing them. They're very important for our network of ships, the services that we offer, the lines that we produce. But for Africa, we've also heard, I think, in the last day, that infrastructure is absolutely critical, starting with initially the terminal infrastructure, but of course also the further hinterland infrastructure as the population will grow.
So everybody wants to know, what are you going to do with this acquisition? What kind of money are you going to throw at this once you start betting it down?
Well, we're not going to be able to tell you what
I know you never tell us much, right? Because you're MSC, so you always keep us hanging.
Well, we are a private company and we will remain a private company, but what I will tell you is that, well, you know what we have spent for the company, but the DNA of our company is to grow. And therefore, the DNA of what we are doing is to advance and further propel the Bolloré Africa Logistics. It's a fantastic organization with a fantastic brand, with great people. We're going to add 20,000 new family members to MSC. So I, of course, also have my mindset in making sure that they feel comfortable, they feel at home, so that they can continue their growth journey. We're going to keep the company separate. We're going to keep it with a separate brand. It won't be the Bolloré brand because that belongs to the Bolloré family, obviously. So we're coming out in the not too distant future with a new brand.
Okay, so we'll wait for that because you still have to wait for regulatory approval. Let's talk about the legacy issues that Bolloré will be leaving behind. I know that you say you guys have a good relationship, and we understand that, but with this acquisition, you also take on a legacy, which has been very widely documented, some good and quite a bit of bad as well. How have you weighed up those risks?
When you go through a process like this, you go through a due diligence process and you weigh indeed everything that you see. I think we've had a very good dialogue with the Bolloré family about all of this. And we have structured the agreement in a way that if there are any bad surprises, which I don't think there will be, but if there are any bad surprises, we have already an agreed mechanism how to sort it out.
What are you worried about?
I'm not worrying about so much. We know that in a portfolio, there will always be good things and bad things. In our own portfolio of terminals or in our liners, there are some routes that are better than others. Times go up and down. This will be the same here. But our mindset is really to develop and grow the business, and I'm convinced that we can do that as well. And what we can bring to Bolloré is, of course, a new dimension in the sense that we come from the ocean side, and our services will, of course, be able to go to the terminals of Bolloré. We will be able to develop those terminals even more as we expand our shipping network.
Yes, I want to talk expansion because you mentioned a few things a few minutes ago. So you've had a very good few years, right? And this is because of the pandemic, when we saw the shipping industry completely disrupted. I mean, carriers were, I mean, it was crazy to see the rerouting and just the congestion at ports once things started to go back up. I've heard from analysts that the last 3 years have been that good for carriers, that it's basically made up for the losses and the lean years that you experienced for 20 years. Is that true? And notice I'm not asking for numbers because I know you don't give numbers, but hopefully you can talk around this.
My first comment, Eleni, to you would be don't believe all the analysts are saying.
Okay.
But that being said, yes, of course we had a couple of good years. But I think it's also important to take the context. I mean, we had definitely 1 or 2 decades where it was not that great. And at the same time, we keep investing billions every year. Just to stay where we are requires billions in dollars of investments. So I wouldn't say that we have deserved it, but I certainly think, number one, we play a pivotal role in world trade. Our industry connects consumers, producers, makes trade happen, brings people out of prosperity. And if you want this industry to keep investing in the future, we also have to earn a living. Now it's been a bit extreme. And
so what are your margins then?
Well, they will not be disclosed, as you know.
I have to try. I'm a numbers person. Okay, yeah, I get that. But can we reflect on why it was so lean and difficult for 20 years? And what has changed now? And let's talk about sort of supply taken out of the market so we can understand the supply-demand dynamics that are so vitally sort of different now.
Well, for years it was a fragmented industry. You had 20, 30 players. For once. Secondly, supply and demand seemed to rule the waves, and there was an excess of supply. Now that equation has turned, and in the meantime, the industry has consolidated, and there are alliances out there. It's still, compared to other industries, a relatively fragmented industry in the sense that top 7 accounts for 80% of capacity. That's not unusual if you look into other industries. But it was so fragmented way back, and it was so reliant on supply and demand that was the real cause of, I think, why it was, not the greatest industry. On the other hand, it was an industry in those years that grew a lot. In the 80s and the 90s, global container shipping was growing 10% per year. So you could say the growth was kind of overshadowing the fact that the returns weren't fantastic.
I mean, was it also because just a lot of competition in the market as well, which is highly competitive?
Yes, as I said, more than 20, 30 players, highly competitive.
Now we've seen consolidation, so there's a bit of a change in dynamics. I want you to tell me what it was like during the pandemic for you guys. And I know that you were in transition at the time, but honestly, when we saw just nothing moving in our seas, right? We were looking at the Baltic Dry Index and it was like there was no movement. And then when we saw the amount of congestion at the ports and just ships for miles out at sea, and we thought, how is this going to be working through the system?
Well, let me tell you my story. I mean, I decided to join this wonderful company in late 2019, but had to take an annual sabbatical as I was leaving one of the large competitors of MSC. And I was sitting literally on my couch, because there was also COVID in Denmark in those days, and I was watching how demand dropped, and I was, of course, thinking, oh, geez, Søren, what have you done? I mean, what is it that you have signed up for? You may be in for a really, really tough time. You may have to come and rescue the pieces or whatever else. So I was a little bit in that frame of mind, but then what very quickly happened, and I think it's fascinating, first of all, we kept the supply chains going. Our seafarers, I think, are some of the real unsung heroes of this world. I mean, they kept working all through these things and kept working with massive restrictions, kept trade flowing. Because imagine what a pandemic with lockdowns would have been if you couldn't even have ordered your, basic amenities, let alone ordering things online. We made sure the supply chains kept flowing. And then what happened was that as COVID over the summer subdued a little bit, a lot of the consumption, or most of the consumption that goes to services, went to physical goods, meaning container demand started to pick up, and it picked up dramatically in really the fourth quarter and into the first quarter of 2021. Really fueled by the American consumer. Everybody needed a fifth television, everybody needed a home renovation, everybody needed a new kitchen. And of course, it was also fueled by the fact that governments pumped billions and billions of dollars into the economy, something we are maybe now seeing a bit of the flip side on in terms of the inflation that's going on in the world.
Exactly, and I mean, if the fifth television, of course, is vital, right? But I wonder now, as inflation is starting to bite in the US and you're seeing, squeezing of monetary policy and hiking of interest rates, and yes, wage growth in the US is looking really robust, but that could turn as gasoline prices and the cost of food increases. So how are you putting that into your model right now in terms of what that's going to do to demand? Are you expecting demand destruction in these important markets?
Indeed. I mean, firstly, I think we have seen that the first quarter of this year has a slight reduction in terms of demand year on year. We have to be careful comparing year on year because first quarter of 21 was really boom. So there's still, I would say, pretty good demand, but year on year it has gone down. We are, of course, wary of what we see on inflation, of interest rates, and so on. So our hope is, of course, that we have some kind of a soft landing, if you can say so, where there's still a bit of growth in the world. Secondly, we are a global company. We are used to the fact that maybe one part of the world is doing well, another one is doing less well. So, of course, we are agile in the sense that we will move our assets around to where the opportunities are. And recently we moved a lot of assets to the US. Who knows? I hope we can move even more assets to Africa.
Are you expecting, incredibly exciting growth on the continent? Because the inflation story and food insecurity is going to hurt the continent, perhaps more so than other regions.
I can say I'm a big Africa believer. I'm a big Africa believer because I think the demographics speak for themselves. We all know that this continent will go from 1.3 billion people to more than 2 billion people in 30 years. All of these people want and deserve the same life that the rest of us, meaning GDP per capita, is bound to grow. I'm sure it'll be choppy. I'm sure it'll be bouncy up and down. But I think if you have the long view, 20, 30 years, I'm convinced Africa is the continent of the future.
So, look, let's be realistic here. Are you pricing in industrialization of the continent where we are producing our own goods, processed goods, and exporting out, which will keep you, of course, busy? Or do you think imports are going to be just as important? What's the mix that you're anticipating here?
I will tell you the truth. We are not as sophisticated that we are making plans for what's happening in 15, 20 years. So hopefully you can bear that. But I would say Africa has all the ingredients to do that. And I think Africa is becoming very much aware of the fact that they can go from just exporting commodities to taking those commodities and making them gradually into more finished goods.
We were talking about the value chain and given your acquisitions that we've seen, and you're talking about organic growth, it looks to me, and I might be wrong here, that you're touching so many parts of the value chain that you're going to be absolutely difficult to replace, right? That your customers are going to have to come to you because they've got sort of a full array of services. Is that the plan?
No, it's not really the plan. And to tell you the truth, the supply chain is immense. And we are covering some elements very deeply, but there are many elements we're not covering. I mean, freight forwarders are very important and large customers to us. We don't intend to compete with them. I mean, they account for maybe half of our business. So obviously, going into a fight with half of our customers would not be very wise, if you would ask me. So we're going to keep a very good relationship with them. We're going to keep growing with them, and I'm sure they will also adapt to the future with digitization and so on. So that's for one. Secondly, we operate in partnerships all over the world. The DNA of our company, built by the Aponte family, is really a company with organic growth, but also a company that's used to working with partners. We will continue to do that as we move forward. There are many things we're not the best at, and for that we need great partners.
I want to talk about the geopolitical issues that we're seeing playing out between Russia and Ukraine and what this war is going to mean for, again, a disruption, Russia being completely crowded out with sanctions, of course, a huge deficit in what we used to see in the movement of grain from that region. How are you guys pricing in this new risk?
Well, immediately we saw that demand stopped completely to and from Ukraine. So that was, of course, the first reality. That meant that those containers came off our ships, and we had to find a way how to deploy, ships in a better way, so to speak, to alleviate that issue. We have, of course, also seen a sharp reduction in import and export out of Russia. We, for sure, sympathize a lot with the Ukrainian people. I mean, this is for sure a very, very tough battle for them. We are trying to support our own people, our seafarers, in the best possible way that we can. And we have done a lot, I think, and we'll continue to do that as a responsible company, but also as a family business. And then I hope, but I don't know, if NATO finds a way to open up certain corridors, we will be the first to step in and offer our services, offer our containers, establish the transport corridor so that things can move. And I can say, as a matter of detail, but right now we are actually resuming some of our exports and imports from the Ukraine. We have built a new corridor via an Italian port where we're offering rail services so that we can still keep part of the economy flowing.
That's incredible to hear that you've been, plugged in terms of keeping the logistics open, because I think we've just been focusing so much on the human impact and the political impact, and we forget about the logistics, the movement of people, the movement of goods, how to keep that economy alive and also get goods in and out. Has it been challenging to try and figure out those corridors, or is it because you guys just have so much experience, you know exactly how to navigate, even during times of instability?
It's been challenging. I mean, we didn't have all the answers in the beginning because we had to see what was going to happen. Was it an all-out war covering all of Ukraine? Now it seems to it's kind of moved more into certain regions of Ukraine. So we have a very competent organization there. Many of them we have had to relocate on their wish to adjacent countries, but they are still operating our business there, or what is left, keeping in contact with the customers and so on. And we have simply tried, as we always try to be very agile, entrepreneurial, and say where's an opportunity. And obviously, a country in such a need deserves also that we are there and providing supply chain corridors for them.
We heard the previous speaker talking about the climate change agenda for the continent, and I think it's a really vital conversation to have with regards to the shipping industry. And we know, I mean, these are the numbers that are going around, so perhaps you would know better, that the shipping industry accounts for 2.5% of global carbon emissions, right? And the cruise liners are actually the biggest emitters because of the facilities on board. I know that you guys are saying that you want to be carbon neutral by 2050, but I know there's different parts of your business. So I want to focus on the cruise liners. I know you're going to say that it's not really under your sort of ambit, but I want to talk about it realistically, what it is that you can do. And then we'll talk cargo separately because we're talking about new vessels. But talk to me about the cruise industry and whether there's real commitment, because we've seen that the industry has been criticized for the lobby of trying to water down some of the rules and regulations that will be implemented.
But Elena, the real challenge with decarbonization is not the ships, the engines, all of the technologies are available. The real challenge for all of us running ships, whether it's cruise ships, cargo ships, bulk ships, and so on, is the availability of fuel, the availability of the green fuel. And this is why we have said all along that, number one, it's very important that we operate in partnerships because nobody can solve this on their own. A shipping company, we are a fuel user. We are not a fuel producer. We don't have all the answers of the future fuel. So it's very important that we operate in partnerships. We have been pushing very hard that we have global R&D that can tackle this problem. Right now there are talks about an R&D fund worth 5 billion. We have said we are willing to up the ante to 10, 15 billion if that's what it takes, so that we find the right global solutions.
So fuel is the issue for you?
Fuel is the issue. Secondly, this will be a transition because the fuel availability dictates the fact that we can't just switch all in 1, 2, or 3 or 4 years. And this is one of the reasons, including on our cruise vessels, that we have gone for LNG, because acknowledging it's a transition that's going to last 15, 20, 25 years also means that we should do what we can in the interim to reduce. And what is it we can do in the interim? We can go to LNG, because that already reduces CO2 emissions by 20%. It takes the black carbon out, which is very bad for the melting of the ice cap. And I'm sure LNG minus 20% becomes 25, 30, 35. Secondly, we need to continue to drive energy efficiency. Energy efficiency is vital, also in the interim period. And there are many technologies we can deploy. I give one example. We have invested on an air lubrication system on 30 of our new buildings. We're basically building a blanket of bubbles underneath the ship, which takes 4 or 5% off the emissions. So there are many things we can do, and it's not just about the very big goal at the end of the rainbow that comes maybe in 2050 or hopefully before.
Hopefully before, because we're running out of time, right? We're at code red when it comes to climate change. Then now I want to talk about cargo vessels, but it's been fascinating to kind of explore this industry where we're dealing with a lot of vessels that are 40 years old, which means that for them to be compliant, they have to go very slowly, so slowly that, you know, it's completely inefficient. There's huge order book for replacement of ships. You guys have been buying a lot. More ships are coming into the market in 2023, so there's a supply question now, because are we going to have too much supply? Are they going to be decommissioning? Are we going to see a huge decommissioning of older ships? How are you seeing that playing out?
The new rules coming into effect next year, EEXI, CII, will demand certain shifts in the tonnage, because there will be ships that simply won't be able to pass the threshold. And it's a progressively threshold that will keep increasing, you could say, the burden, because it starts in 23, but it gets worse in 24, 25, 26. So the way we have looked at it is, number one, we need to replace old assets, end of life. We need to replace a number of charter ships, because we prefer to run predominantly our own fleet. We need to be compliant to the new rules, and these new rules, CII, probably means that we will have to reduce the speed. And for now, because there are not green fuels available in the quantities that we need, the only answer to this is either to slow down and add ships or to remove ports. But of course the problem is, if you remove ports, you still need to fill your assets in a responsible way. So that's really what we have looked at. And then of course we still expect there will be growth in the world. I don't see the world, I mean, the world goes up and down. We've had a very positive spell. Maybe we will have a spell now which is going to be a little bit less positive, but over time I'm sure trade will grow.
I want to talk about freight charges very quickly, and only because I feel I have to ask you this question, because I've spoken to many businesses that say freight charges are just completely unaffordable right now. For you, you're saying, listen, finally we're making some money, which means we can invest into the industry, and you know, we also need to take money home at the end of the day. Do you think freight charges now are overly inflated, that they're not really reflective of supply-demand dynamics, and do you think we've got some downside coming? Or are you happy with what you're seeing right now, that this is a true reflection and we need to come to grips with what freight charges are like right now?
Well, we are seeing you could say, the back end of what is supply and demand, because the freight charters reflect supply and demand. For a long, long time, it has been driven by oversupply. Therefore, freight charges were low, and customers were pushing us very hard for lower and lower freight charges. Now, the flip side of that is, once you get an excess of demand and a lack of supply, freight charges,
But is that realistic? Because we had such a huge shock that warped supply-demand dynamics, and there was sort of a backlash.
No, so over time it will normalize again, and that also means that freight charges will, whatever normalize means, they will probably not be at the current level for the very long term. But it's also a fact that, and this we have seen speaking to numerous customers, that of course some commodities are very sensitive to the freight rate, no doubt about it. But there are also many commodities that are not. You know, the classic example I always give is the pair of sneakers, where the freight charges was normally about 10 cents per pair, retailing for 120 US in the shop. Now maybe the freight charges are 30, 40 cents a pair. I don't think that's going to change the retail price in the shop. So it's a very diverse picture you see. But of course, some commodities are suffering from high freight charges.
I guess one could argue that it's just compounding already huge inflation we're seeing across the board, right? So this is why the question seems to be coming up. You mentioned family business quite a lot. And it's a great way to also not answer my question on numbers. Hopefully one day, Søren, you'll be able to give me more numbers. But I think the family business model has been fascinating because actually it's been a positive. That's why you've been able to sort of survive, as I say, through these years. And I find there's so many African family-owned businesses that seem to be, doing really well. And it's an interesting model for the African markets that seems to be, growing. What is your sense, having worked in the corporate industry, family versus, publicly listed company, and the pros and cons?
I came from a stock-listed company with a majority family owner, so there was also a relatively long perspective. But it's probably fair to say that when you're really private, the perspective becomes even longer. The ability to look at trends not on a 5-10-year scale, it moves to a 20-30-year scale. That's certainly one of the differences. Secondly, I would say agility in decision making is not always a given in a family company, for sure. But what I've experienced now is that the agility to make decisions is simply, a competitive edge. And of course, you need to be close to your business. I think that's also very important. Operating at 50,000 feet, you become removed. In our business, you have to be close. You need to know what's going on.
How involved is the family?
They are involved.
Very involved?
Yes.
Okay,
they
fantastic.
are involved. And I tell you the truth, so that now that you're asking me, it's actually a blessing, because coming in on the back of 52 years with pure family leadership, I don't think it would have been an advisable thing for the family to exit and the new CEO to enter. So I would any day of the week argue for this. But of course, it's a progressive change for both parties, for them and for me.
And succession planning is important, right?
I think you will have to ask them as well. But
will they give me an interview, do you think?
I think by hiring me, they have answered your question.
Fantastic. Okay. So another one, which is maybe sort of me being ambitious for the continent, because I really want to see Africa prosper. When are we going to see such an important port on the continent, that could rival what we see in LA or we see in sort of big ports in the East, or even in the Middle East, for example? Do you have aspirations to build something like that? And how far away would we be?
Let's not rival LA, would be my first recommendation.
Why not?
But let's do better than LA. That would be my recommendation. And I'm convinced we can do better than LA. And yes, I'm convinced those ports will also come to Africa. Actually, if you look at the developments in the last 10 years, we have gone from basically having no ports handling what we would call a 13,000, 14,000 TEU vessel, which is a vessel that has a draft of about 14, 15 meters, 366 meters long, and so on. To today, we are basically close to having 7 to 10 ports that can do that. And this development will continue, and we see it as our role, not only to grow our business and make money, but really to develop the infrastructure that the world needs and the infrastructure that Africa needs. So we are certainly on a pathway to do that, because it will also grow our shipping business.
Well, Søren, I hope to see you in many more African cities. And I really look forward to asking the questions again down the line to see how the experience has been. And we look forward to you bedding down your acquisition on the continent. Thank you so very much for your insights.
Thanks to you.
It's fantastic. Thank you. A round of applause, ladies and gentlemen, the CEO of MSC. Thank you.
voici de retour dans la bulle de cette Web TV du Africa CEO Forum pour parler de disruptors. Effectivement, nous sommes très heureux d'avoir cette séquence, vous allez le comprendre dans quelques instants, parce que c'est la toute première fois que l'Africa CEO Forum et Visa ont décidé de réunir donc une trentaine de CEO de startups africaines les plus dynamiques à travers toute la nouvelle dynamique et initiative qui s'opère ici. Et c'est le Disruptive Show, j'ai envie de dire. On a pour cela le plaisir de recevoir ici Coralie Lolio, qui est Community Lead donc, de ce projet, qui va nous en dire un petit peu plus, bien entendu. Aïdara Diarra, merci d'être là. Vous êtes senior vice-présidente subsaharienne chez Visa. Et nous avons aussi Karim Beguir, CEO de Instadi, basé à Londres, mais qui a démarré en Tunisie, bien entendu. On reviendra tout à l'heure. Et aussi, it's a great pleasure to have Ikena Mwizi, CEO of Relief, right?
Yes, that's correct.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Merci beaucoup. Coralie, vous allez nous parler un petit peu de cette initiative, d'où elle est née, quels sont les objectifs de ce rendez-vous que vous proposez pour la toute première fois au Africa CEO Forum.
Tout à fait. Alors, le Disruptors Club, c'est une initiative qui est née au cœur de l'Africa CEO Forum, en partenariat avec Visa. Et l'objectif vraiment, c'était de pouvoir apporter l'innovation au cœur des multinationales du continent. Et également de pouvoir apporter un vent de fraîcheur à tous nos panels qui sont en partie constitués d'institutions panafricaines qui ont leur histoire et qui ont besoin aussi d'un certain renouveau. Donc c'était vraiment dans cette démarche-là qu'on souhaitait inviter les plus grands start-upers du continent qui a eux-mêmes levé $1 milliard de fonds depuis leur création et qui ont vraiment marqué l'année 2021 et le début de l'année 2022 avec leur capacité de créer de nouvelles avenues de croissance pour le continent. Donc ça, c'est vraiment les objectifs majeurs du Disruptors Club que l'on a bien évidemment fait en partenariat avec un partenaire de longue date à l'ACF qui est avec nous, Aïda Diarra, ici présente.
Alors justement, Aïda, ça prend un partenaire pour croire, pour investir. Pourquoi vous avez accepté de rejoindre cette initiative et de l'accompagner justement?
Pour nous, pour Visa, l'innovation est au cœur du développement économique. Et pouvoir contribuer avec l'Africa CEO Forum à une initiative qui est porteuse d'innovation et qui surtout aide nos jeunes entreprises à avoir la visibilité et à être le flambeau de ce que va être le futur du continent, c'était une opportunité absolument extraordinaire.
Alors, ce que vous avez fait, c'est que vous n'êtes pas concentré sur un seul corps de métier ou d'activité ou de secteur. C'était important justement d'avoir une palette très large de profils dans les sélections. Comment ça s'est passé, cette identification?
Bien, en partenariat avec Visa, on a totalement été dans une approche de prendre des startups qui sont parmi, si vous voulez, différents secteurs, logistique, health tech, intelligence artificielle, santé, agriculture également, de façon à pouvoir être représentatif de tous les secteurs qui sont porteurs d'avenir sur le continent. Et puis aussi de représenter les femmes qui sont start-upeuses, c'était très important pour nous. Donc diversité de secteurs et diversité de genre également.
Alors,
chose très importante.
Très important. Est-ce qu'il y en avait plus? On a retenu qu'une trentaine. Est-ce que vous avez senti qu'il y avait vraiment une présence, notamment sur le continent en Afrique, de ces startups qui sont à la fois dynamiques, innovantes et puis qui osent réaliser des projets majeurs?
Le continent est dynamique et regorge de talents, de jeunes investisseurs et de femmes entrepreneurs également. Le choix est difficile parce que le portefeuille d'options se retrouvait sur plusieurs pays, plusieurs industries. Mais pour moi, c'est le début. C'est le début et je pense, comme l'a dit Coralie, que le fait de reconnaître l'importance de la technologie dans différents secteurs de l'activité économique est fondamental. Et pour nous, c'est apporter notre pierre à l'édifice.
Est-ce que vous étiez présente hier lors des Awards? Je ne sais pas si vous avez eu la chance de voir, il y avait une catégorie créée, le Disruptor de l'année. Est-ce que vous avez eu la chance d'être là? Je ne sais pas, il y avait tellement de monde, je ne sais pas si on s'est tous vus.
J'ai eu le privilège de remettre le prix aux gagnants. Et pour moi, encore une fois, c'est
la symbolique derrière ça. Pour vous.
Elle est très importante. Elle est très importante parce que ce sont des jeunes qui ont choisi de capitaliser sur ce que la technologie apporte aujourd'hui pour transformer les secteurs d'activité dans lesquels ils sont et au regard de tous les challenges qu'ils peuvent avoir et qui ont décidé, en plus de ça, d'avoir un impact sur le long terme. Et ça, pour moi, c'est fondamental. Et pour Visa, ça rentre en ligne avec ce que l'on fait dans le domaine de la technologie et des innovateurs dans le domaine de la finance.
L'innovation, juste pour faire la transition, qui va avoir son sens, vous comprendrez, avec Karim Beguir, qui est CEO et fondateur donc, de ISADIP. Parlez-nous justement de votre activité, comment elle est née, d'où c'est parti. Et puis, vous êtes dans ce secteur de l'intelligence artificielle. Et l'Afrique, parfois, on a l'impression que c'est incompatible. Et bien au contraire, vous en êtes la preuve. Karim?
Absolument, merci. C'est un plaisir d'être là aussi au Forum. Et effectivement, à Stadip, nous avions commencé avec 2 ordinateurs et 2000 € à Tunis. J'avais une passion pour l'intelligence artificielle et je voulais aussi prouver que les jeunes talents en Afrique sont capables d'innover, de travailler et de faire des choses fantastiques dans ce domaine qui est considéré comme un domaine de deep tech.
Et vous démarrez
en 2014.
2014.
Voilà, on démarre en 2014 et on a réussi à créer la société donc en tant que bootstrap avec très peu de moyens. Aujourd'hui, nous sommes considérés comme un leader de l'IA dans toute la zone Europe, Afrique, Moyen-Orient. Nous avons plus de 200 employés. Nous avons fait une levée de fonds de 100 millions de dollars en série B en janvier de cette année, qui est la plus grande levée dans le continent dans ce qui concerne l'IA. Et peut-être le message positif, c'est de dire que voilà, si vous êtes entrepreneur en Afrique, si vous souhaitez innover, c'est possible aujourd'hui. Et dans ce qui concerne l'intelligence artificielle, il y a énormément de choses à faire. Nous sommes à un moment extrêmement important dans le développement de cette technologie.
Alors, on parle des disruptors. On est aussi dans ce contexte de crise post-pandémie, là, la crise en Ukraine. Vous avez cet ADN, vous, d'innover tout le temps. Est-ce que l'innovation, finalement, dans un contexte beaucoup plus difficile, n'est pas une sorte de folie parfois, ou est-ce que finalement ça contribue à apporter des solutions dans des contextes particuliers?
Donc je pense effectivement que voilà, dans un contexte de crise, nous devons avancer. Et ce qui est intéressant aujourd'hui, c'est que voilà, il y a énormément de richesses qui peuvent être créées avec l'innovation. En ce qui concerne l'IA, nous savons que ça va être la technologie marquante du XXIe siècle. L'impact économique de l'IA sera plus grand que celui d'Internet. Et donc, c'est une question critique pour l'avenir du continent que les jeunes Africains maîtrisent l'IA, qu'ils innovent, qu'ils construisent les systèmes dont ils ont besoin plutôt que de laisser le reste du monde développer ces technologies. J'étais hier sur un panel de souveraineté économique. Pour moi, l'IA, c'est une question essentielle de souveraineté économique, mais c'est aussi une formidable opportunité. Des richesses immenses peuvent être créées avec l'innovation technologique et notre rôle est de faire en sorte que l'Afrique en fasse partie.
Très rapidement, vous me parliez de moments justement parce que l'Africa CEO Forum sont des zones de rencontre et vous vous retrouvez là, une trentaine de startups. Quel est l'élément qui vous a quelque part stimulé ou quelles étaient les visions qui vous ont beaucoup interpellé?
Donc c'était formidable de voir plein de jeunes talents, entrepreneurs, beaucoup d'énergie, beaucoup de points de vue différents. Et j'en sors avec beaucoup d'optimisme en fait sur la qualité de l'entrepreneuriat en Afrique. Je dirais aujourd'hui, en fait, il y a beaucoup de moyens de financement qui sont disponibles et c'est un vrai plaisir de voir une nouvelle génération d'entrepreneurs très compétents, très ouverts sur le monde. Il y a eu des points de vue extraordinaires avec notamment avec Noureddine de Yassir et cette idée de créer une super app pour toute l'Afrique. Mais ce type d'ambition qui d'habitude, on voit ces choses-là en Silicon Valley, on commence à voir ça en Afrique et ça fait très plaisir et je suis très optimiste pour l'avenir.
Et c'est stimulant, merci beaucoup. Et cette Afrique justement, elle est plurielle à travers ce projet Disruptor Club. You have also people from Nigeria, I guess, I'm not sure. Yes, from Nigeria,
yeah,
right?
Nigeria.
Yes, and can you talk a little bit about your program or your business?
Yeah,
Relief.
definitely. So Relief is formed with a thesis that we need to bring food processing back to the farms. We need to localize food processing to where agricultural production occurs. The reason why this is important is because if you look at a raw crop's weight versus the input in that crop that's required by industry, about 90% of that crop's weight is waste. And so it doesn't make sense to carry that crop 200 miles while it's rotting and getting lower quality to these factories. It makes a lot more sense to process closer to the farm gate. And so that's what our company does by creating both hardware and software to make this value chain work better. So on the hardware side, We invented literally a nutcracker for the sustainable oil, literally a nutcracker.
Wow.
Yeah, for the sustainable oil palm sector. And so what it does is it better processes oil palm nuts than the typical method that smallholder farmers employ. So in the Nigerian market, smallholders make up 80% of the market, but the tools that they use to process this crop are very rudimentary. And so a common practice is for a farmer to use a handheld rock to crack open these little nuts that are the size of the first notch of your thumb. And so our nutcracker, even though it's just a nutcracker, processes 200 times faster. And then on the software side, we use geospatial technology to understand where does this crop grow best, not just where the most trees are, but where the most supply actually is. And then from that location, what are the logistics routes and the customers that you'll be able to serve. And we use that to then inform where we put our nutcracker. But at the end of the day, it's a business where we buy agricultural produce, we process it, and then we sell these inputs to fast-moving consumer good companies.
Coralie, would like to react to the? I would like to know what is the process to select the disruptors? How you define the way to go to the English part or Francophone part, or how the balance you create in your project?
Well, it's a complex exercise, I'm not going to lie, because there are so many disruptive companies on the continent. But what we did is that we did truly research those that were most prominent in their innovation and creativity. And of course, the Africa CEO Forum is part of a media group that has been looking out for disruptors and innovators for decades now. So we have a base of journalists as well who have informed us on who truly were the most disruptive innovators of the continent. And we also were supported by our partners who were able to tell us as well who were the most disruptive men and women in Africa as for now. But of course, we wanted to take not only those who've been disruptors, but those who've been able to create on the continent. Because what
bring the answer, continental answer.
Yes, yes. So because we wanted people who were able to operate and have their HQ in Africa, who had raised a certain amount of money as well. Those were important factors for us. And of course, we looked into Lusophone Africa, Francophone, Anglophone. So that's pretty much how we did it for this year. And hopefully the process will get better and better.
Yeah, it's a real challenge.
It's very complicated, but we made it. And we have a beautiful selection, I believe.
Yes, I imagine also for Visa to be all the continents, it's important to reach, for sure, ladies and men, but a precise champion for you is important also to reveal the competence between this collaboration and partnership with the Africa CEO Forum?
It's key. It's key because they have the reach. Like I say, it's a space where we believe we have a role to play in the ecosystem, but we went beyond the financial world, and it was critical to partner with Africa CEO to make sure that we casted the net broader from our existing industry.
And you know, Africa CEO Forum is 10 years history. You just start with the disruptor. Do you remember the sequence yesterday when the winner come just like this and say not aware about the fact he's gonna be win this award? He come just like this. This is the part of the new generation also to react, and sometimes the destiny come and knock at the door and they hear, and we need this form of this profile of winner.
You know, it's beyond destiny, because each and every one of them has worked very, very hard and also has had the vision and seeing opportunities where, you know, in many cases we don't see, you know, the common of the, you know, people don't see. And it's the resilience and the ambition and the positiveness, the optimism about their, you know, capability to transform and to impact that is just phenomenal. And the fact that he's been selected, the winner was selected and not prepared, just gave it a particular taste to it.
Absolutely. Was so
very touched.
Ikena Nwezi, is it your first time in Côte d'Ivoire, Abidjan? No.
It's my second time.
Second time.
Yeah.
You know,
I was here in February and I had to come back again.
For sure.
Yeah.
You have to bridge, you know, this bridge between the francophone part and the English part. And in your business, is it also an important thing to reach the new market, the new place, to propose your solution?
Yeah,
Do you have a chance to meet a couple of partners for this?
Yeah, definitely. So when we designed our technology and our company, when we look at a crop, we look at that crop over a region. So multiple countries where the technology can be addressed. So Francophone West Africa was 100% a part of our addressable market. And I was here in February doing market research on Côte d'Ivoire. And it looks like a very likely location where our company will expand into. Because I am a little challenged with my French right now, we also brought on a team member who speaks French. So we'll have some of that bilingual nature.
Oh, you have to speak French, depending. You prefer to bring someone.
As I learn, you know.
Perfect. That's good. Karim, the project born in Tunisia, but you're based in London, right? So my question for you is, when you create this artificial intelligence here in the Africa, and you travel to also maintain your business in London, is it a new opening with the disruptors from the Africa to the world also? The answer has to be challenging also the intelligence internationally.
I think tech is global. Tech has no frontiers today. And so the idea is to build up African giants, companies that have a strong identity from Africa in terms of the teams, also another, but fundamentally could be global leaders. So this is our vision. Actually, we just opened also an office in the US on the MIT campus on Kendall Square. And the message is, there is no limit if you have the right passion and competence to what you can achieve. And we are trying to find the right mix between building a global company, but also making tangible contributions for the ecosystem in Africa. Just to give you one example, we are designing a locust swarm detection system in partnership with Google, and this is a non-lucrative project, which we hope will one day help the FAO and other international organizations fight against this significant food safety issue in Africa. We have that pioneering spirit of trying to build up solutions for Africa with African talent and African creativity. Initiatives we've done, for example, around the neglected tropical diseases was, hey, you know, when you think about, for example, drug design, you think about big pharma groups, but our thesis was that the community could actually, if given the tools, be creative in a sort of open and decentralized way, and we got great results which are now tested by DNDi, a completely open, 100% African initiative. So Africa can bring another take on innovation and have results, be pragmatic and progress this way.
Alors, une trentaine de disrupteurs qui sont présents dans cette première aventure avec Visa, bien entendu. On va en retrouver tout à l'heure d'autres. Est-ce que vous avez parlé du genre, justement, vous avez des disrupteurs qui vous ont le plus touché personnellement, Coralie, ou des histoires que vous nous partagez pour ceux qui nous suivent,
Tout à fait. Bien,
nous illustrer un peu ce projet.
Il y a j'ai l'une des start-upeuses disruptives qui va venir nous rejoindre sur le plateau, qui est Tarmim Saïd Dalsoum, une femme soudanaise qui a réussi à créer une plateforme de e-commerce, la plus grande plateforme de e-commerce au Soudan, qui a réussi à lever 4,5 millions de dollars, ce qui est quelque chose qui n'existe pas aujourd'hui.
Inédit.
Inédit, puisque en général, ce qu'il faut savoir, c'est que la majorité des startups fondées par des femmes sur le continent, selon nos critères pour le Disruptors Club que l'on a cherché, sont vraiment dans une marge de 2 à 4 millions de dollars levés. Mais on arrive rarement au-delà des 5, 6, 7 millions de dollars levés. C'est très très rare. Alors pour avoir une femme qui, dans une zone géographique du continent déjà compliquée, qui a réussi à lever de tels fonds, c'est extraordinaire. Vraiment, c'est une histoire qui m'a touchée et elle va pouvoir la raconter mieux que moi quand elle nous rejoindra.
On aura hâte justement de la retrouver. Je commence quand même à finir avec Visa pour dire merci de la confiance que vous apportez à ces start-upers, parce qu'il faut plus de partenaires. C'est aussi une occasion de se dire que plus on est de partenaires, plus on peut accueillir plus de start-up dans ce projet-là. C'est une ouverture aussi que vous avez chez vous de pouvoir être inclusif dans l'accompagnement ces startups?
Absolument. Nous avons intégré dans notre approche d'offres de services et de digitalisation du cash des partenaires tels que les fintechs qui jouent un rôle absolument phénoménal dans leur capacité à créer de l'accès, à ramener les petites et moyennes entreprises dans le secteur financier formel et aussi à donner de l'accès aux consommateurs. Et depuis maintenant quelques années, nous mettons en place une feuille de route qui leur permet de rentrer sur le réseau Visa, de bénéficier de nos outils. Alors on le fait de manière différente, hein. Soit on investit, soit on fait des accords avec eux, soit on met à leur disposition notre technologie à travers nos centres d'innovation. Mais pour nous, ces intervenants sont au cœur du dynamisme de l'industrie financière, de l'industrie du paiement.
Excellent, merci beaucoup Aïda Diarra. Senior Vice President Sub-Saharan Africa Visa, merci de votre présence et de la confiance dans ce projet avec Africa CEO Forum. Merci Coralie Lalliot, je ne sais pas si tu vas rester avec nous quelques instants. En tout cas, j'ai envie de dire que c'était petit bébé qui est Community Lead of Disruptor Club. Merci infiniment Karim Beguir, CEO de InstaDeep. Merci de votre présence et bonne continuation. Thank you so much to be here. Mr. Ikena Nkwezi. Is it the right way to say?
Nzewi. Yeah,
I don't insist too much. Okay. And you are the CEO of Really. Thank you so much.
Correct.
Et on va retrouver d'autres disrupteurs dans quelques instants justement sur cette plateforme, la Webtv du Africa CEO Forum. On se retrouve dans quelques instants. Merci d'utiliser le hashtag d'ailleurs ACF 2022 pour continuer à commenter, partager et réagir sur tout ce que vous voyez dans le cadre de cette édition ici à Abidjan. A tout de suite.